Hello, my name is Sergio Feitosa and I am the author and presenter of this training, Design Concepts for Electric Panels, Switchgear, Bus Ducts and Substations. This training was made with a focus in designers of equipment and substation equipment. It is composed of a group of video classes that we hope that cover most of the disciplines which are necessary in the daily life of a designer. We hope that it is useful for you. 11 of the training. Technical specifications and main tests for the purchase of high voltage circuit breakers, disconnectors, surge arresters, and other equipment for substations. In this video, we will prepare a summary of the main specifications made by power utility and large users of electricity to buy equipment for substation. We will explain why the more efficient specification is just to refer to the technical standard, preferably the IC technical standard, with few additions. We'll present also some typical errors that occur when the company, instead of referring to standards, starting preparing new tests including unverifiable requirements, or just doing some copy and pastes that may insert errors. We'll show examples for main substation equipment like circuit breakers, isolators, disconnectors, and so on. And we'll show the concepts of the main type tests, including these substations. In the link above, you may find several good publications. Effects of currents and voltages within the daily life of a substation are listed in the left side. The specifications are prepared to attend each one of these aspects under normal and abnormal conditions. The most efficient specification is the IC technical standard, or the equivalent national standard. For this last case, this is good when the national standard is updated, but this is very rare to occur because the countries take so much time, some 3 years, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, to convert that IC standard written in English to their national language. To refer to an existing official standard is much better than to rewrite the standard within the company specification. This is because when you are doing this, or doing the copy-paste, or doing some kind of translation, many errors are inserted. And we will show here some examples. For example, I saw in one recent technical specification from one power utility, it was written there, the temperature rise of the connections and contacts should be 53 Celsius degree. In one very single sentence, there are 2 errors. The first one is because you cannot state that the temperature rise will be something like. You have to state the maximum temperature rise that can appear in that connection or contact. Then the correct sentence, the maximum temperature rise should be 53 Kelvin, because temperature rise are not expressed in Celsius in the IC standards, although both scales have 100 degrees of difference. The correct should attend the temperature rise requirements of IC 62271-1, common clause to high voltage equipment. If you simply refer to the technical standard, everything is written there. You don't need to create things, especially wrong things, like in this case. As I was saying, To attempt to rewrite the existing IC standard is a source of error. Some examples are here. The design of the contact must be done so that the electromechanical cannot open it. These are wrong and inefficient senses because uh, nobody will prove this. These are not verifiable statement. The correct thing is just to say, specify the short-term time current and crash test. These are tests specified in the IC standards just to check this statement. Use the best quality materials, technologies new and of recent manufacture. Is also not verifiable. The correct thing in such cases is to specify materials according to NEMA, ASTM, or some other specific standard. This is the correct way to do because everything is written in such standard, so the statement becomes verifiable. Another very common sentence to find this wrong sentence is the following. Quality of manufacturing should be the highest quality and according to the best modern practice of high quality. This is completely wrong to say because it's not verifiable. The correct is to put something like the specification should be done with a possibility of verification, something referring to a test, to a standard where the test is prescribed and so on. Use now the example of specification of high voltage isolators or disconnectors because this is an equipment in which most of the normal specifications of related to the use of normal and abnormal currents and normal and abnormal voltage appear there. I would say that the only requirements which is not covered by isolators are the breaking capacity of circuit breakers. Now, usually the disconnectors are in series with some circuit breakers, then they should attend most of the requirements of circuit breaker except the breaking capacity. Here you may see the main specification of high voltage isolators and disconnectors. All of this is written in the standard, in the IC standard. And usually you don't need to repeat everything in your test. Write in your test, in the company specification, only the things that are absolutely necessary to be included there. And refer to the IC standard because the methods of test, names of the test, and everything is already written there. Then here, example, in this table, made by one power utility, you specify the rated voltage, okay, this, because let's say the buyer needs to know this, the frequency, insulation levels, and here you may show the values because if you open the standard to see, in some cases there are alternative values which are possible, so you should indicate what is the one that you need for your isolator. Power frequency withstand voltage, number of poles, the rated currents, short circuit currents, RIV, radio interference voltage level, this is another value that you should specify, corona, and so on. So all the characteristics which are required by you should be clear in a very easy table, easy to read table like this one. In case of some disconnectors or in some load switches, it's required to have the ability to interrupt small currents at maximum operating voltage. Usually when you do this, you need to specify the values of the amperes that should be interrupted, should break it, referring it to a certain value of capacitance. Usually these values are values of capacitance of the bus bars which are near the isolator, that disconnector in the substation. Here in this movie you may see a single operation of this type, and just for for information. The main type tests are all explained in these slides, and they are applicable to many of the other items of the substation, and we may see here the methods of tests and the particularities of each one are explained in the IC standards. In this case, for disconnectors, IC 62271-1, and here are some tests. Withstand voltage at lightning impulse, at switch impulse, dry and wet. These are two different conditions specified there. Withstand voltage for power frequency, dry and wet also. Temperature rise test, which is a very important one to assure that the equipment will have the expected durability. The rated short time withstand current and crash, which is a test to demonstrate that the equipment is able to support the electrodynamical effects and thermal effects of the short circuits. Mechanical resistance and operation, which is a test in which you do a very big number of operations to see if the equipment will be maintained in a good condition after the several operations which are necessary during the time life. The radio interference voltage test, we will explain each one of these more ahead in this presentation. Visual corona tests, breaking and make tests. Usually this is applicable only for circuit breakers or switching equipment. For switches and fuses, sometimes you have also requirements a little bit different from the main circuit breakers, but basically all these tests, break and make tests, are applicable to circuit breaker, but not to isolators. Called high voltage tests are the ones that we mentioned in the previous slides, and are the short duration power frequency withstand voltage tests, dry and wet, in which we try to demonstrate that the equipment is able to support, to withstand the temporary overvoltage that will occur to each along the several operations of the daily life. We explained about this kind of temporary overvoltage in the item in the chapter about coordination insulation. Atmospheric impulse test, switch impulse test, if it's applicable, depending on the level of voltage, of rated voltage of the equipment, the radio interference voltage, and visual corona. We'll show most of these tests in more details more ahead. Here you see the main concepts for the withstand voltage and power frequency dry and wet test. Usually is a test in which you will mount the equipment basically in the same way that it will be mounted in the substation as far as possible of that condition. You will feed the points where the insulation of it shall work in a proper way under the specified voltage levels, and will supply this voltage with one AC transformer. And usually the voltage that will be applied in the test, in the duration which is mentioned above, is the voltage which are also prescribed in the test for that level of rated voltage. The main objective of the test is to apply voltage to see if it will be supported without discharge, and just after the test you check if no discharge occurred, and in this case it is approved. In the right side, I show one equipment mounted for test in one important high voltage testing laboratory. You see at the bottom of the fault, in the more or less in the middle, where we have the red line connecting the cascade transformer, to the terminal of the isolator. This is a very interesting figure to have an understanding of how the test is done. On the right side, we have one voltage divider, we have one the isolator under test, and you have everything there prepared for such kind of test shown in the electric circuit in the middle. This figure in the left part and below part of the slide, you see one equipment. It's a kind of seems to be just one column of insulator, which will be submitted to the applied voltage test in wet condition. You simulate the rain that will occur, and this is applied in the equipment under certain rules which are very clearly specified in the IC standards. And here we have the so-called bias test, in which we simulate one operation in one circumstance in one substation in which you have one isolator which is energized at one of the sides, and suppose that in the other side one impulse drops along the conductor or some parts that is not energized. But if you have this situation, you may have in the equipment between the open gap of that equipment a sum of one impulse voltage, which is shown in the lower part of the figure, and this can be summed with the industrial frequency voltage, which is applied in the other side. If this situation occurs at the peak voltage of the AC voltage of industrial frequency, you may have the sum of the two voltages, and this would be one applied voltage higher than the impulse alone or the voltage industrial frequency alone. This is the so-called bias test. In this test also we have the 15 applications of the impulse, and up to 2 failures to discharge are permitted to have the equipment approved. And here we have another situation which is related to the radio interference voltage test. When you have one equipment which is energized with some at a certain level, a little bit higher than the rated voltage of the maximum voltage of the system, if the equipment is energized, some high frequency pulses are generated by the equipment or lines, and they are propagated through conductors or maybe irradiated. We are not telling here in this case of this test of irradiated pulse. We are speaking about propagated through conductors pulses. These pulses, if we are above a certain level, they can interfere with radio, especially on the AM bands. Then the test which is done, the concept is relatively simple. We apply a voltage up to something around 1.1 phase to grounds voltage in the terminals, applying this between the terminals and base, and we go with this voltage up and down, and during a certain type of cycle, and along this cycle we are measuring the voltage drop in the resistor, which is showed in the right side of the figure. This resistor, the RRIV meter, is like a little bit more sophisticated voltmeter. And the voltage drop in this resistor, which is measured in the RIV meter, should not be above the maximum value which was included in the specification. We arrive to the temperature rise test, which in my point of view, one of the most important requirements of most of the equipment within one substation, because in a certain way it is very determinant for the design of the equipment. Let's say the most influencing aspect of the design for most of the equipment is to attend the requirements of temperature rise. And in the temperature rise test, what we do is to apply the maximum currents which will be used by equipment. We generally call this the rated nominal currents, rated normal currents. We apply these currents during a duration sufficient to have a complete stabilization of the temperatures around the equipment and temperature around all the points of the equipment that we are under measurement. And these points where we put some thermocouples to determine the temperatures. And as the name says, temperature rise is the difference between the temperature of a certain point, which is measured along the test, and the temperature of the air in the vicinity of the equipment. And this temperature rise, the values which are obtained at the temperature stabilization, should be lower than certain values that are very clearly specified in the high voltage equipment IC standard, and these values shall not be overpassed. And the main reason for these values, these are the values that will determine if let's call it this way, the life cycle of the equipment will be normal or will be reduced. Some of these points are related to the questions and about aging of contacts, connections, and so on. And some others, like the temperature of surfaces, are related to the maximum temperatures that cannot be reached unless someone could be injured if touch the equipment. Not, of course, not energized part, but a metallic part near the equipment. In the case of cubicles, switchgear, panels, it's very easy to understand that we are always measuring, in this case, the temperatures of the energized parts, but also the temperature of the enclosures. In such a way that we verify that if one person arrives there outside the enclosure and touch there, it will not injured by the high temperatures of the plates. Then continue with the temperature rise test, the fundamentals. We mount the equipment as in normal use in a site without air drafts. Then you cannot do a test inside a room with open doors where the air will flow, because these have a very high influence in the temperatures which will be measured in the parts. We shall apply the permanent rated currents, wait for the temperature stabilization, and this takes hours. In the case, for example, of power transformers, this can, even if it's a very big transformer, can be more than days. We can have 2 days, 1 day, waiting for the temperature stabilization. For switchgear, like isolators, circuit breakers, this usually takes some 5 hours, 6 hours, 4 hours, not something so with a so very big duration. We measure the temperature rise of the relevant points, specifying the technical standards. We compare with the limits prescribed in the standard, and know the temperature rise during the test. We can know what would be the temperatures if the outside air was, for example, and this is the limit temperature, work temperature for IC standard, if the temperature of the air in the external side would be something like 40 degrees, for example. We register in the test report the relevant parameters, and that is it. In in the publications part of my site, of Cognitor site, there are several articles about temperature rise, including one which I would say that's important and it's related to deficiency that there is in IEC 61439-1 for low voltage switchgear, in which the temperature rise limits are not explained at all. Here we present the short time withstand current and peak withstand current test, and this test is a very important one and is one of the most expensive tests that we have in the standards, because the mountings are big to do, takes some time to mount these equipments, and this test requires the use of a high power laboratory, which are normal installations that to use it, we are speaking about something like at minimum some $3,000 per day, and this can reach something like $10,000 per day. Let's say to do a test of this unit is always one expensive thing. And for this test, we simulate the situations of a short circuit occurring in some parts of the substation. In the case of the isolators that we see in the figure, we'll apply this short circuit in the main blades or also in the earthing blades. And the standard specify some basic physical arrangements that will be used for the mounting of the test. And normally the concept is to mount the equipment more or less in the same situation that should occur in the substation. We usually do before the test one the measurements of the resistance of the main circuit. We do an operation without load before the test, and after the test, after the short circuit, we repeat the same operations. We measure again the resistance, and we try to do again the operation without load. For example, if the equipment did not go well in the test, the contacts may be firmly connected, can be even soldered by the very high currents and very high temperatures inside. And if you cannot do the operation without load, then this means that the equipment did not pass the test. This would occur in the substation also. And we do also a measurement of the resistance of the main circuit after the test, and if it increases by more than 20% of the previous value before the test, then you should do beyond a visual spectrum, you should do one additional temperature rise test to be sure that the equipment is still in a condition that, let's say, it would be approved in the temperature rise test after this. Then we arrived to the high voltage circuit breakers, and for high voltage circuit breakers we have the same basic specifications that we saw before for the isolators or disconnectors, and some more specifications which are related to the breaking capacity of the circuit breaker. Circuit breaker is one equipment that is normally in series with the isolators, but in the case of a short circuit, it will be operated to open the short circuit current, or in the case of switching of the circuit, it will be open, interrupting, let's say, normal currents and so on. Now you may see the process of current interruption, which occurs in circuit breakers, fuses, and switches. In the top left side, you may see a figure with one circuit composed of resistance, inductance, and capacitance, and fed by a source voltage. In the other extreme, you see the circuit breaker. This circuit is representative of what happens with a circuit breaker when it's going to break a certain current, short circuit current. You see, if you look in the lower parts of the figure, you see one black line which represents the currents, and this current is interrupting the breaking moments where the voltage of the network, of the source, is passing approximately near to the peak voltage of the source. You see then that when the current is interrupted at the zero value, transient recovery voltage, which is the black oscillating line, occurs, and this oscillating voltage depends directly of the values of the resistance, inductance, and capacitance, which of the region near to the circuit breaker. Depending of that values, you have different values of the peak voltage of this black figure and different values of the frequency. The process works in the way that the red line, which represents the capability of the circuit breaker while it's opening the circuit, to support the voltage between the two streams of the contacts. Then this line, this red line, is a, let's say, a property of a circuit breaker, and the black line, the oscillating black line, is something imposed by the circuit where the circuit breaker is inserted. The idea here is that the circuit breaker is fast enough to maintain the red line always over the transients that will appear due to the process of interruption. Then, basically, these figures represent what happens during the interruption of a circuit breaker. And here you may see the complete list of type tests specified in IC 62271-100 for high voltage circuit breaker, and there are many tests. And for the breaking test, short circuit test, there are several variations like short line fault test, out of phase making and breaking test, capacitive current switching test, and all of these situations are required for the several types of breaking operation that a circuit breaker will have along the daily life. So, for example, if you have a short line fault, one test simulating the condition of a circuit breaker operating a short circuit, which happens very near to the output of the substation, we have some conditions of transient recovery voltage which are quite different from another circuit breaker that is breaking a terminal fault test. Let's say it's breaking a short circuit current which is happening very near it, or is different also with a condition that one capacitive current is being interrupted by the circuit breaker. Suppose one circuit breaker breaking the current of a very big bunch of capacitors near it. Then the several conditions that may happen to different types of circuit breakers are simulated by all these tests. What we do in these several breaking tests is to apply conditions that we are clearly defined in the IC standards of type of faults to be represented, single-phase fault, two-phase faults, and the type of fault is normally represented by the voltage, current, and power factor of the circuit which is being interrupted. We use as a parameter also the percentage of current asymmetry at interruption. This is another important condition that depends case by case of the conditions along the interruption. We simulate for each different condition the transient recovery voltage, growth rate, and the completed shape of the voltage that would appear in the circuit. That is, the transient recovery voltage waves that are described in details in the standard, their object is to represent the several different types of transient recovery during the braking operation when the current passes through zero is interrupted. And the fact is that for each different situation of the ones that we saw in the previous slides, you have different values of resistance, inductance, and capacitance, making that the values of the peak voltage of the black curve that we show in the right side of this slide are represented. Let's say, if we change the values of resistance, inductance, and capacitance, we will have the black wave with different values of peak voltage and the frequencies of the oscillation. And for each one of the specific situations that a circuit breaker will have to interrupt, there is one test representing that situation. There is also, we see in the blue part in the right side of this slide, we simulate the short circuits at terminals at 10%, 30%, 60%, 100% of the short circuit currents. And you could ask me the following: okay, sir, why not doing only the test at maximum short circuit current, let's say the 100% test? This is because depending on the situation and location of the circuit breaker, and even if it is a circuit breaker which is in a very new substation or in a very old location, when usually it is more near the 100% values, while in the beginning of one substation, when it is new, normally the circuits are not completely developed, the loads are not completely implanted near the substation, and you may have the circuit breaker operating at 10%, 30% of the maximum possibilities that it has. Depending on each one of these circumstances, you may have different values of the transient recovery voltage. And that braking test that we are certainly are the most onerous test that we have for substation equipment. They are aimed in representing all of these substations, situations in the substation. And of course, we never want that a circuit breaker fail, because all the safety of the substation depends on its performance. Here we have some other basic variations of the short circuit test, the braking test, short line faults, where you simulate conditions at 90%, 75%, and 60% of the maximum short circuit current of the breaker. Out of phase switching, capacitive current switching, small inductive current switching. You see that all of these circumstances are related to specific uses of the circuit breaker along its life. And for each one of them, you have different values of currents and different values of the transient recovery voltage that will be applied during the test. We have here the one part of one specification of a circuit breaker done by a power utility, and I inserted here not all the specifications because the other ones are quite similar to the ones that we showed for the isolator some slides before. But here, in the circuit breaker specification, we include also the short circuit parameters, rated breaking capacity, in this case is 40 kiloamps RMS, the percentage of continuous currents components, the rated duration of the short circuit, that in this case is 3 seconds, usually it's 1 second, something like this, but in this case it's 3 seconds. The number of interruptions without maintenance is a very important data needed to be informed by the manufacturer. The transient recovery voltage that the circuit breaker can support, and these values that you see in the right side, these are values that actually they are written in the IC standard. Usually, you don't need to repeat these ones here. And if it is easy for you to just say something like the transient recovery voltage for terminal fault should be according to page 30 of the IC standard, because these values are already written there. In this case here, the power utility decided to repeat the values. In my view, this is not good because when typing these things, you may do mistakes. And if you do mistakes, the mistake is yours, not, let's say, the manufacturer is not guilty if you insert the wrong value here, which eventually unfavorable to you. The operating cycles, open 0.3 seconds, close open, 3 minutes, close open, and this is the cycle that will be performed by circuit breaker, and in some of the tests that will be done, some of the breaking tests, these cycles will be used during the test. Then open means that you apply during the test one short circuit, the circuit breaker will open circuit, it will stay 0.3 seconds opened, then you close again short circuit, like a reclosing operation of circuit breaker, and we will open again. Suppose that the short circuit was still in the place there, it was not eliminated, and then the circuit breaker needs to open the circuit again. You wait 3 minutes more, and then you do another close open operation, as the short circuit is persistent in the system. And you use this operating cycle during some of the main breaking tests that we have to do. We have some more characteristics for the line characteristics, the transient recovery voltage for terminal faults, for no load lines. And as I said before, if these ones are clearly written in the document, IC documents, it's better, instead of repeating, typing everything again, just to say, do according to page of the IC standard, blah, blah, blah. That will be more safe, because the possibility, the chance of typing a wrong value is much lower. I said before, for the interruption of small inductive currents, for out-of-phase switching. Out-of-phase switching is when you have one circuit breaker which is, let's say, in the interconnection of two different systems. You have the circuit has voltage in both sides, fed by different sources. And in the case of a short circuit, eventually you may have a loss of synchronism. If this happens, the voltage applied to the circuit breaker can become much higher, and theoretically can even arrive to the double of the normal applied voltage. Then, for circuit breakers that can be used in this kind of situation, this type of out-of-phase switching is recommended. Then we arrive to certain characteristics of the specifications of surge arresters, and we explained many details on surge arresters in the chapter 6 of this training about the transients and insulation coordination. But just remembering here, we have, let's say, when you have one lightning arrestor, one surge arrestor, in this figure here, in the lower part of the figure, you see one transformer and one surge arrestor. If one pulse, for example, one atmospheric discharge drops in the line and come walking along the line in the direction of the transformer, you have in any point of this circuit, you have the value of this surge, this overvoltage caused by the surge, summed up to the normal voltage, the industrial frequency voltage of the line, which is connected to the transformer. When this overvoltage, which you can see in the right top side of this figure, arrives to the lightning arrestor, to the surge arrestor, then the impedance, the resistance, let's call resistance, the resistance of the surge arrestor should become extremely low. The ideal thing would be to be zero, deviating all the overvoltage to the ground. What happens is that the surge arrestor is not a perfect, let's say, zero resistance circuit. It has some impedance, some resistance, and a voltage drop will be applied, will surge in the terminals of the surge arrestor. And if you look to the circuit, this voltage drop is the same value, basically the same value that will be applied to the insulation of the transformer, of the equipment that is protected by the surge arrestor. Then what we do in the specifications and in the tests of the surge arresters is to try to specify and to test with the values that are expected to occur in the power system. Here I took from one course that I did in very past and show the evolution of the surge arresters along the time. Let's say the original surge arresters, the most simple ones, were simply one, what we call the air discharges, one open gap with two edges that if an overvoltage arrives to that edges, that we know the distance between in the gap. If the voltage was higher than a certain value, discharge was produced. After this, the surge arresters evolved to the carbonate of silicium surge arresters, which had also gaps, but they were a set of a gap in series with these small pieces of special material that had a more controllable value of resistance, but was not yet a resistance that's as low as we would like to have. The ideal surge arrestor is someone that before the receiving the discharge, it is one infinite impedance, and in the exact moment of the discharge should become instantaneously zero impedance. This perfection do not exist, but when we arrived to the current surge arresters that we have today, which are the metal oxide ZNO surge arresters without gaps, we are more near this situation of, let's say, a perfect zero impedance, than we were in the very beginning when we had the air discharges. Nowadays, such arrests that, as we see in the right side of this figure, which had one enclosure made of porcelain, practically replaced by such arrests which use polymeric materials in the cover of the internal parts. And this is important because usually such arresters are installed very near to the bushings of the transformers. And as near as possible is better. To have the surge arrestor very near to the bushing of the transformer is the best situation that we have. The problem is that when we have porcelain, surge arresters from time to time can explode, can fail. And in the case of explosion of surge arrestor made of porcelain, very big pieces of porcelain can be dropped in a very big distance because the pressure inside is extremely high, and these pieces can injure people, or more probably can injure the porcelain of the bushings of the transformer which are in the nearby. And then that's the reason why the polymeric surge arresters are available now and practically replacing all the use of porcelain. They are much lighter, easier to install, and do not have this problem of the explosions. Circuit showing the currents and the over voltage for the old surge arresters with caps. Aspects related to the advantages of the polymeric surge arresters made of metal oxide, ZNO. No fragmentation of the enclosure, less air spaces, which implies in less moisture penetration. Without pressure relief devices, it's cheaper, and 50% of the weight. All these things make the difference for the current CNO surge arresters. The main concept of the use of surge arresters is relatively easy to understand. Let's say we have one element that is something like one resistor that should be very near to an infinite resistance before the arrival of one surge or one overvoltage, and should become practically zero resistance when one steep overvoltage arrives. Then this can be seen as an equipment having one time voltage curve, where you have 4 times with higher values like the times of the temporary overvoltage displayed in chapter 6 of the training. For this case, we should have the need that these certain values of voltage will be supported with no kind of discharge. Let's say if you want the surge arrestor, you are applying you are in 138 kV system where the voltage is, the theoretical voltage is 138 divided by square root of 3. Suppose that you are in the peak hour of a circuit in one certain substation, and this voltage instead of 138 kV is something phase is something like 145 kilovolts phase to phase. Then even for these very high values that can occur in one substation during certain parts of the day, of course the surge arrestor should not discharge, should not permit the passage of the current. It should work as one infinite resistor in this condition. And by the other side, if one atmospheric pulse is arriving with a very short duration, occur, these values of voltage are much higher than the ones of the temporary overvoltage. Then the surge arrestor, also in this case, should support these values of overvoltage without discharging or discharging above a certain specified value. At the end, we have something like time versus voltage curve. And these characteristics should be prepared, specified in such a way that all these values that will permit the discharge of the surge arrestor will be values lower than the withstandability of the equipment which is being protected. And we have here some terms we using in surge arrestor specification. Rated voltage. Rated voltage for surge arrestor is not the rated voltage that as the system, the maximum voltage as for isolators, a circuit breaker. Rated voltage of the surge arrestor is some value quite higher than these ones, because are the values that the surge arrestor should support without discharging. Then there is a number of definitions: continuous operating voltage, maximum continuous operating voltage, which we have the withstand voltage versus time characteristics, and all these values are well defined in the IC standards about surge arrestors. Here we have some other denominations, some other terms used in the metal oxide surge arrestors standards and specifications, and we have several different types of discharge, rated discharge current. This is the peak value of 1 atmospheric impulse current used to classify the surge arrestors under one wave h by 20 microseconds. Let's say this kind of wave will be the reference wave to be used along some of the tests. High current surge, then we have there one discharge current of 4 by 10 microseconds. And if you look line by line at the specifications in the standards, there are several different values which correspond to several different types of discharges that the surge arrestor should support to attain that curve that we saw in the previous slides. This figure was prepared to give us an idea about the selection of surge arrestors of the ZNO type. We have to take care of the values of the maximum continuous operating voltage, MCOV, the protective characteristics for the different overvoltage, the protective characteristics of the surge arrestor, the durability that we need, and this is strongly associated with the surge arrestor energy absorption capability. And also we have to take care of the overpressure relief in case of failures. This is especially important for surge arrestors made of porcelain, which is not the case of the current polymeric surge arrestors. We shall ensure that during the selection that the MCOV equals or exceeds the maximum operating voltage of the system at the point of application. And if we take a look in this figure, in the left bottom side, we show here in a stylized way the curves representing the overvoltage which occur in the system, the long duration and short duration ones. Suppose that we did a insulation coordination study and we detected which levels of lightning impulse, surge impulse, temporary overvoltage. Let's suppose that we checked for each value of overvoltage the corresponding duration and constructed a curve more or less like this blue one. Above this curve, we should have the curve of the surge arrestor. Let's say the surge arrestor should have a curve which is above the overvoltage that the system will produce. Why? Because otherwise the surge arrestor will discharge in an undue way. Generally, let's say just as an order of magnitudes, the distance between this blue curve and the red curve is something of the order of magnitude of, let's say, 15, 20, 30%, something like this. And then above the curve of the surge arrestor, we have the curves of supportability, withstandability of the transformer or another equipment which is to be protected. Let's say in this curve we see in the black curve, in the upper parts, in this case we are showing for three different impulse levels a curve which represents the impulses and the applied voltage of longer duration that the transformer or other equipment can support. Then the idea is to find in the specification the right curve of the surge arrestor considering the overvoltage systems and considering the possibility, several possibilities that we have when specifying the NBI and other withstandability voltage of the transformer or another equipment which will be protected. And then you may see here some lines of the specification prepared by the power utility from where I took these examples, and they have here surge arrestors to be used in the system where the system rated voltage is 230 kV, the rated frequency 60 Hz, the system maximum continuous operating voltage, phase to phase is 242 kV. Then when the system is operating, in this case, the maximum voltage that we have between phases is 242 kilovolts. If we take a look, the phase to ground voltage, 242 divided by square of 3, we see in the top is something like 140 kV. But the maximum continuous operating voltage phase to neutral of this surge arrestor will be 106 kV. That is a value which is higher than the maximum phase to ground voltage that may appear in the system, which in this case is 140 kV. And by the end, the surge arrestor rated voltage is a value referred to a test which is done with a duration of 10 seconds, more or less like saying that this is the voltage that the lightning arrestor can support during 10 seconds without discharging. Then you see that the concept of rated voltage, the nomenclature of rated voltage for surge arrestors is quite different from the denominations that we give to circuit breakers, isolators, and so on. Here we have other specifications, and in the upper part of this table we see several residual voltages for different types of waves. And we should remember that residual voltage is the peak value of the voltage drop that will occur between the terminals of the surge arrestor when one discharge of a certain shape passes through it. Then there are several specifications related to this maximum voltage for different shapes of currents. And we should remember that this residual voltage is basically, if you want, let's say, the bushing of one transformer was placed side by side with the surge arrestor, this would be the same voltage that would be applied to the insulation of the protected transformer. We have here also the pressure withstand currents, pressure relief withstand currents, which are the values, in this example here, 40 kiloamps, that can pass through the surge arrestor. It will explode, or it will relieve, the pressure will be relieved during the failure of the surge arrestor, and the small pieces, when, for example, if it is made of porcelain, the small pieces that will be dropped will drop in a space of 45 degrees from the top of the lightning arrestor. Let's say this space where the pieces shall be contained is designed in such a way that this small piece will not reach the bushing of a transformer or persons or some other thing which is being protected. Minimum temporary overvoltage, pós-discharge, we have here a curve for 10 seconds, 1 second and 0.1 seconds. The value in this case was specified as 216 kilovolts during 10 seconds. You could specify the three values for the three durations, leakage currents, and so on. If you take a look in the surge arrestor specification, there is a number, very big number of specifications, much more numbers that you would find in one circuit breaker, for example, just to compare with substation equipment. Here we have some additional specifications, and one important one is the last line of this table, which is the energy absorption capacity. In this example here, 8 kilojoules by kilovolts. This factor is directly associated with the durability of the surge arrestor. The higher is this number, let's say, the more easy for the surge arrestor is to deal with the big amount of energy which will circulate through it during the moment of a discharge. And here in the next three slides, just one more two, there are interesting examples of the selection of surge arrestors for three different systems in the same power utility. One system is 220 kV, the other one 132 kV, and the other one 66 kV. Here in this slide you may see the system main values, the nominal system volt, highest system volt, and so on. The protective symmetrical fault currents, the equipment to be protected. You see here the lightning impulse levels and the power frequency stand levels. And then here in this table you may see the practice of this power utility in the selection of values for the surge arrestors related to the system in the previous slides. You may see here some values of the specification of these arrestors. And here some more of those specifications. As I explained before, here is the complete list of the main tests applicable to surge arrestors, and you see that you have a very big amount of tests for representative of all the overvoltage that should appear, tests related to the arrestor, to the arrestor housing, to the metal oxide blocks. It's an extensive list of parameters that should be checked along all of these tests. Testing a lightning surge arrestor completely is something quite expensive for doing. For current transformers, we will not go into details, but basically the specifications related to the passage of currents and to the application of overvoltage is more or less the same that you see we saw before for the isolators, disconnectors, and so on. The only thing which is interesting to mention for current transformers is that there are some tests which are applicable to the protection cores and to the measuring cores related to the passage of short-circuit currents. When you have one protection core and one very high current, a short-circuit current pass through the current transformer, let's say the image in the secondary side shall be a perfect image of the current which is passing. And there is one test to check this. In the same way, there is a test to check the passage of the rated currents of the current transformer. There are some short-circuit tests in which you apply short-circuit in the primary wind, in the primary side, and you measure the currents in the secondary winding to see if the ratio of currents is within certain values, certain margins which are specified for this test. And in the case of the measuring cores, we have some tests also to assure that if a short circuit occurs and passes through the primary winding, the currents, and this is the contrary of the protection cores, the currents are limited to a value of something like 50 amps, because it's not the function of the measuring core to reproduce the currents for very high values of short circuits. This would damage the secondary windings. And there is a test to check if when a short circuit passes in the primary side, if the currents in the secondary side is limited to something like 50 amps, which will not damage the wires and so on. Then, for power transformers and reactors, many of the specifications are similar to the ones that we presented before, but there is something interesting for power transformers. As this equipment is most of the times very heavy and difficult, and in many cases can be very big and difficult to bring it to a testing laboratory to do tests, to do a short-circuit test, for example, it is permitting the IC standard that tests are replaced by a memory for calculation of short circuits. In these calculations, usually you do a calculation of electrodynamic stresses in the transformer and a calculation of the thermal capacity to withstand short circuits in the windings. This is usually done when it's not possible to carry the transformer to a testing lab, or if the transformer is very big to be tested in a certain laboratory. It is interesting to mention that this is one opening caused by the size of the transformers, the weight they have, and the difficulty that we have to put this inside one lab. But putting this aside, there is a fact that the literature shows that something like 33% of the transformers that are tested for short circuits usually fail in the first test. This is interesting because it's not failing because there is a serious error in the design. but something very linked to small details that you can detect only when you test the equipment. And this is only to mention this aspect of power transformers. Here we show some typical values that I found in the specification of one reactor for using the same substation that we showed in the previous slides for the specifications of the circuit breakers and the isolators. You see here that it is a system with a rated voltage 230 kV, and in the lower part you may see that for this transformer, 1 over voltage curve versus duration is specified 1.8 per unit during 50 milliseconds, 1.4 per unit during 200 milliseconds, 1.1 per unit by 3 hours. This is a curve that intends to check just from the point of a small temporary overvoltage, as in the case of 1.8 per unit, to the normal overload currents which occur, for example, 10%, 1.2 per unit along 3 hours. This kind of curve comes usually from the experience of electric power utility in the use of their equipment. And here there is some more data for the specification, and one interesting point to mention here is the temperature rise limits, the hotspot, in this case is specified as 65 Kelvin. In general, transformers are classified related to temperature rise in transformers for 65 Kelvin or 55 Kelvin. These are the two most used specifications. There are some special cases, but these are the ones that we see usually in the market. Here are some additional specifications for that reactor that we showed in the two previous slides. And here I marked in blue color one thing that you may see only equipment that have engines and are usually installed near to lightning surge arresters. The atmospheric impulse withstand voltage with cut wave. You see that when we could see in some slides before that when surge arrestor deviates the current which coming through the line to the ground, it produces the wave which is coming is basically composed of two exponentials. Let's say the impulse waves we are used to see like 1.2 by 50 microseconds, the shape of these waves. But many times when you have this shape, and it's easy to imagine this impulse is coming through the line, and when it arrives to the lightning arrestor, in some point or in the initial part of the curve or in the second part of the curve, it's cut by the lightning arrestor. And that kind of wave, which is, we are calling here the cut wave, can be very severe for the insulation of equipment. The insulation of wind equipment is very sensitive to these cut waves. And that's the reason why, in addition to the traditional atmospheric impulse with voltage that we see in the table, there is also one particular value for atmospheric impulse withstand voltage for cut wave. Here some additional requirements. First one about the station current and the T of the curve, which is related to the saturation level. In this case, 125% at rated voltage of 242 kV. Then this is of course a very important specification for a transformer to define the saturation values, because the power utility needed to attend the requirements established by the electrical sector regulator related to the values of maximum saturation permitted. Another point here in this slide is the requirement of overloads. That's the overloads in transformer occur all the days of life of a transformer. Most of the transformers are submitted to a kind of cycle in which during the day, during the off-peak hours, the loads are something practically every time lower than 100%, but something between 60% and 80% of the value of maximum power, the rated power. But in the peak hours, which usually is a period of 4 hours in the end of the day and the beginning of the night, the transformer is overloaded to values like 110%, 120%, 130%, and these occur with certain durations during every day. And here is one example of the requirements included in the specification of these transformers for a 230 kV. And here we see the list of the completed tests which were included in these specification. We have the type test, temperature rise and noise level, some special tests as the ones listed in this slide, and the routine tests, which are the ones in this Brazilian standard, which is exactly like the IC standard for power transformers. You see that in the list of tests not included short circuit tests. Possibly in this case it was based by some kind of calculation, and but it's not included in the list. And then we arrived to the last slide of this presentation, and as final comments, resuming something that we mentioned in the several slides before. When we are doing a specification, we should maintain the focus in the main aspects. The main tests, withstand voltages, temperature rise, rated short time, withstand current press. There are mechanical tests also, but maintain the focus in the main aspects. Do not commit big errors. You need to remember always that the most intelligent thing to do when preparing a specification is just to refer the proper existing IC technical standard. Many people all over the world discuss this, and certainly you will not do it better. Certainly national committees will not improve one IC standard. Certainly. And when you go to insert a big test, deducting things from IC standard, you do something different from that, you are, of course, subject to errors, like the example that I showed you in the beginning of this presentation. Another thing, do not try to copy-paste the IC standard to make a many-page specification. This is very common when someone wants to demonstrate skill knowledge and put many pages there, and when you are doing this, you insert mistakes. Always insert mistakes. Do the thing in an easy way. Write as few words as possible, just referring the proper items of the IC standard, and you'll be doing a very good work. Thank you very much for your attention, and see you in the next chapter of this training. Then we arrived to the last slide of this presentation, and we thank you very much for your attention, and we hope to see you again in the next video class of this training. Thank you very much.